On this video, I'm going to show you how to configure our app to run with Firebase on iOS. So here we are back to the Firebase dashboard for our project. And in the previous video, we registered our app to run with Android. So we can see that this shows up over here with the Android logo. So what we're going to do next is tap on the plus button, and then we're going to choose the iOS icon. Then we are presented with a dialog where we need to enter the project ID. So the first thing that we need to do is to work out what our project ID is. And in order to do this, we will need to use Xcode. So to move forward at this stage, you need to have Xcode installed on your system. Okay, so if we head back to Android Studio, we're going to find the iOS folder over here. And what we want to do is to right click, then we're going to select Flutter, and then open iOS module in Xcode. So this is going to open the Xcode project. And before we move forward, let me give you a very quick tour of the Xcode project. So first of all, if you go to the left side over here, you can find a top level item called Runner. And Runner is the name of the Xcode project that was generated when we created the Flutter project. So every time you create a new Flutter project, this will generate an Xcode project for running on iOS, and the name of the project is always going to be Runner. Now, if we click on this top level item, we are taken to this page where we can see a number of different configuration settings. So from here, we want to make sure that we select the Runner tab that sits inside the Targets section. So we don't want to be under Project Runner, we want to be under Targets Runner. Okay, so we wanted to find out what the iOS bundle ID is. And what we are looking for is this text over here called bundle identifier. Now I want to point out that the bundle ID is case sensitive. And you can see that the last part of the name over here uses a camel case naming convention. So while the Android application ID was all in lowercase, be aware that this is different on iOS. The other thing that I want to point out is that there is a red icon over here asking us to choose a development team. Now, this is only necessary if you want to run the app on a real iOS device. So, to run on a real device, you need to have an Apple developer account and you need to use it over here. For now, we only care about running on the iOS simulator, so we don't need to do anything here. So, we're going to select the bundle identifier, copy it, and if we get back to our browser, we can paste it over here. Next, we can choose an app nickname. So for example, Time Tracker Flutter Course. And because we haven't registered this app with the App Store, we don't have an App Store ID yet, so we can leave this empty. And then we can tap on Register App. The next step is to download the config file and import it into our Xcode project. So I'm going to download the file, and then once this is complete, I'm gonna save it, and then I'm going to open the downloads folder over here. So now I can see the Google service-info.plist file, and the best way to import this is to take the file and drag and drop it into Xcode. So we're going to do that now. So I'm going to take this file, I'm going to drag it all the way into Xcode, and I'm just going to drop it here under the info.plist file. And once I drop the file, this confirmation window appears. So here we have a checkbox called Add to Targets. It is very important that this checkbox is selected, because if it's not selected, then the file will be added to the project but will not be included as part of the build process, and this will cause the application to crash at runtime because it's missing the required Firebase configuration. Now there is one more thing that we must make sure that we do, and that is to enable this checkbox called Copy Items if needed. And what this does is make sure that the file is actually copied into the Runner folder inside the Xcode project. So if we forget to do this, Xcode will only keep a reference to the file in our downloads folder. So once again, we are going to select Copy Items if needed, and this will ensure that our file is physically copied over in the right folder. Okay, so we can now tap on Finish to add our configuration file, and after doing this, we can notice that it's now added to the project. So as an additional check, we can view the target ownership of this file on this panel to the right, and this gives us a chance to ensure that the file is added to the target. Alright, so we have now added the plist configuration file to our Xcode project, and if we head back to our browser, we can continue to the next step. Okay, so the instructions here say that we should do an additional step to configure our dependencies, and the recommended way to do this is with CocoaPods. Now, CocoaPods is a dependency management system for iOS, and it is normally used to install third-party libraries into an iOS project. Since we are creating a Flutter app, we don't actually need to perform this step. And the reason for this is that Flutter has its own dependency management system, and on iOS this already uses CocoaPods under the hood. In other words, this step is not required because we are configuring our iOS application as part of our Flutter project, and the Flutter build system will take care of configuring all the iOS dependencies for us. So let's skip to the next step. Okay, so what we can see here are some instructions for initializing Firebase inside our iOS project. And guess what? We don't need to do this step, because all the required configuration will be done when we install the Firebase authentication dependency into our Flutter project. So once again, we can skip to the next step. Okay, so these instructions now tell us to run the application to verify our installation. But since our app is a Flutter app and not a native iOS app, we can skip this step for now. So I'm going to tap on Skip over here. And we are now back to our dashboard. Okay, so we have now configured both our Android and iOS apps to run with Firebase. In the next video, we are going to complete the configuration of our Flutter project so that we can use Firebase in our app.